Short sleeve shirt in February. Putting some of the pollen substitute in on top of the sugar block here. Curious to see whether they really are interested in the pollen substitute powder, or whether they'll just totally ignore it. The patty that was in this hive is gone. We still have a little bit of the winter patty, and they're chomping through the sugar. So I'm going to have to come back to this hive and throw some more sugar in. I have a feeling that their resources are a little low. But I'll be curious to see exactly what they do with that little pile of pollen substitute that I just dropped there on top of the sugar block. It's somewhat strange to have these warm days. Last week it hit 70 some degrees. This week it was a little bit cooler, and it was time to go in and take a look at the hives. Beekeeping is about counting backwards. You have to keep in mind that it takes about 21 days for, from egg to the hatching of a bee, and another 10 or 12 days before they're out of the hive. So we have to look forward and then count backwards. We know things come into bloom around the beginning of April, and it's now the first week of March. So if you work your way backwards, you have to say, well, now is when we want to see a lot of eggs being laid in the hives. Well, how can you encourage that? Well, the biggest thing it's going to do it is the length of the day, which we don't really have too much control over. The other thing is got to do with how much carbohydrate they have in the hive, as in sugar or sugar water or honey, preferably honey, but you know how that goes, and how much pollen is available to feed the larvae when they hatch. That we can also control. So we want to encourage these girls to be doing as much as they possibly can now. There is some danger to that, and we'll talk about that in a little while. It looked like they had eaten some of the pollen substitute. They certainly weren't crazy about it and didn't devour it. So it was time to put on a pollen patty or a pollen cake. These we get from a company called Better Bee. They're global pollen patties, which have 15% real pollen in them, which is about the best you can do on the pollen patties. But at least this was real pollen that we're about to stick in there, and that should give them something to feed the larvae that hatch that is real pollen. This hive is our Atlantis hive, which has been the weak hive. In fact, at one point in time, I thought they might have died out. They are definitely very active, but looking down through there, I don't see the types of stores that make me comfortable. So I'm going to pay a lot of attention to this hive and try to keep it really packed out with sugar and with pollen, and hopefully they recover, and hopefully we get a good deal of spring bees out of them. Hive beetle larvae. I'll get rid of those. Yes, those little parasites love the patties as well, especially the winter patties, which are primarily fat. But I have a nice solution coming up for them. Alright guys, let you keep things busy for a while. Come on out of there. Come on. I don't want to get trapped in a place where we won't be able to get back out of. For now, I am just putting in partial patties. I just want to kickstart things. Later this month, we'll really increase the amount of feed that they're receiving. These guys are still pretty good on food. I'm going to change their wet burlap. I'd like to maybe get a little more patty in there, though. A little bit more patty. Dry burlap. guys are right up against starvation. That's good. I'm leaving the styrofoam out on the top. I think we're past any of the really, really deep freezes, although we're going to have some cold temperatures. Lots of water. Lots of wet burlap. These guys definitely could use some sugar and some patty. I'm going to actually throw a full pollen patty in here.
This is our Troy hive, which is packed full of honey and really has the potential of becoming a major hive this year. So we're going to give them a full pollen patty and try to keep them from swarming.
Come on, girl. Come on. There we go. And pretty much the rest of whatever sugar block I have. Although, again, I see plenty of honey.
So one of the dangers of having a nice, strong spring buildup is the bees have one thing in mind: to reproduce hives through swarming. So the stronger the hive is, the more likely they are to divide themselves and go hang in somebody's tree. So it's important to keep an eye as they develop their strength in the spring to make sure they're not putting up any queen cells for a swarm.
So it's early March. A little too early to do a victory dance yet, but it certainly looks like all three hives are strong. The weather has been a roller coaster. Warm, freezing, warm, freezing. And that's very bad for bees. The queen will start laying, she'll lay out a lot of brood, and then suddenly the temperatures drop. And if they drop too hard, too fast, the cluster may not form correctly, and you end up with small clusters of bees, which can be, easily chilled out. Also, they can't cover the brood that's been laid necessarily and keep it warm, so you can end up with chilled brood and kill off the bees that are going to be your foraging bees in the spring. So it's a dangerous time. I'm going to keep the insulation on the hives because the nights still are getting very cold, and I don't want to lose whatever bees we have, in the brood stages. But so far I'm very happy with what I see. First week of March, we still might have some tricks left into winter. We still might have a big storm. We still might have some cold spells, but normally in March you don't get these super cold spells that would endanger the hives. They all have feed, they all have pollen, so got my fingers crossed.